Hello and good morning to everyone that's dialing in. Thanks for joining us. We're going to wait just a sort of minute or two just to let folks get onto the call as always. The numbers are sort of moving up, but thank you for joining us today. We're looking forward to bringing you this insightful conversation. We've got a number of pieces of slide content and data for you, and also onto a real lived experience interview as well. So super excited about this today. So we'll just give it probably another minute, I think. And we've got a few folks on the line already, which is amazing. So thank you for joining. You'll see a couple of different ways of engaging with us today. So we've got the Slido sort of QR code that you can see there. We've got the chat function as well. And Callum and team will be there talking to you throughout. And then, of course, we've got the sort of the Q&A as well, if there are sort of questions that you want to raise there as well. So we're at 11:32, so let's sort of kick off sort of formally. We've got quite a bit of sort of content to get through today. So a warm welcome to everyone that's just dialing in. My name is Matt Cameron, and I lead our membership services here at LGBT Great, and also I am the CEO as well. Lucky me. So do everything from sort of the strategic development of our sort of membership programs and engagement across the financial and professional services industry, and also responsible for building our communities, engaging with members, and taking the business forward. So really excited to be joined today by three amazing, two colleagues and a guest speaker. Do you want to say hello to everyone, folks?
Hiya.
Hi all, it's great to be here.
Hello everyone, welcome.
Thank you, folks. So yeah, we'll give a bit more of an intro later on in terms of the speakers today. Perhaps let's move over on to sort of the next slide, Trey. Really delighted, as always, part of our sort of programming within sort of the industry, bringing sort of member organisations together, and we're really proud of all of the organisations that continue to work with us and to work together to create more LGBTQ+ recognition and visibility right across the industry. And of course, you know, interventions like this and bringing you content around important awareness days is a key part of the work that we do here to provide all parts of the community as far as we can with a platform and with a voice as well. And of course, today we're celebrating Awareness Week for Aromantic people. And this, of course, features into our sort of whole month-long programming for our sort of hashtag Making History campaign, which we've been building really right throughout the month of February. So marking Black History Month in the US and also LGBTQ+ History Month here in the UK as well. So stay tuned for more content next week, specifically around that, and we'll tell you about our forthcoming events shortly. If we just pop over onto the next slide there, we want to sort of get you thinking with us. So essentially want to ask you a question. So how would you rate your understanding of aromantic identities on a scale of 1 to 5? So hopefully you've got the QR code for this. It might be worth popping back, Callum, to the first slide, just so folks have got the QR code again. There we go. So you'll see the QR code the bottom left of the screen, just to gauge understanding. So what we often find is that particularly from conversations we have with organisations and folks in networks and things, aromantic and sort of asexual awareness tends to be one of the cornerstones and parts of the community that isn't really spoken about that much. And there tends to be a lower level of awareness even amongst our community around this sort of specific intersection and identity as well. So when you think about aromantic, what is it that you think of? Let's pop back forward to the question, Callum, and we'll take a look at what people are telling us in a moment. So how would you rate your understanding of aromantic identities on a scale of 1 to 5? Give you a few more moments just to sort of catch your votes there. We've got some questions coming through as well, so thank you for those. Brilliant. Let's have a little look at what results are telling us. Have we got a technical issue?
Yeah, I think I'm not seeing any results. Callum, if you stop sharing the screen, actually, I can start sharing it. I think that'll be slightly easier.
Technology is great when it works, but not so great when it doesn't. You can also, of course, share some thoughts in there with us as well. There's a few questions coming through. Super, yeah. Enable the chat for people to engage. And the poll hasn't launched in Slido. Let's move on from the poll and we'll see if we can get it working a little later on. Could I ask the LGBT Great team to be having a look at the background? That would be marvellous. So Callum, if we can go back to the slides, please. That would be great.
There we go. It should work now. Can everyone see it?
Let's have a little look. There we go. Yes,
now,
we can.
Yeah, if everyone, there we go.
Brilliant. So the votes are now coming through. Good teamwork, everybody. Nothing like being put on the spot with these things. So how would you rate your understanding of aromantic identities on a scale of 1 to 5? I'm guessing 1 being the least and 5 being the most. So we see a few sort of scores coming through there. But yeah, generally speaking, I think sort of awareness, particularly around this space, is a little lower. A few more moments just for votes to come through. But I think, the kind of the results there are particularly sort of compelling, right? It's around 44%, only at 1, and just 6% of people at a 4 and 5 sort of respectively.
Yeah.
Superb. Interesting. What do you think that's sort of telling us, Shreya? Obviously, awareness is sort of generally low. Is this kind of consistent with some of the data themes that we see around this space?
Definitely, Matt. I think this is like something that I was personally expecting anyway, because like as I was also doing research for this webinar, like even like just the just data around aromanticism is very less. There's sort of a dearth of literature. And even like the people's understanding is very sort of low. So this is essentially what I was expecting. And I mean, 43 people have responded, and 47% of them say that they basically have like the minimal understanding in this scale. So yeah, it's exactly what I was expecting to see.
Great, brilliant. Well, we're in sort of the presenter mode here on sort of the slides. We can see sort of the next slide sort of coming along there. So let's go on sort of over to it. And we're just going to sort of tell you a little bit about some of the things that we do at LGBT Great very, very quickly before we move on into today's sort of session. But first and foremost, LGBT Great is a membership platform of financial and professional services organisations. So we do a lot of this kind of thing, awareness building, lots of looking at sort of lived experience data and thinking about organisational best practice as well. And this part of our work is led by my colleague Alex Gabbett, our head of insights and content and advisory. And then we also have Shreyas on the team here as well, who supports Alex with the delivery of a lot of our content, and also Georgie Williams as well, who's also part of our team there. But visibility is also a key part, a key aspect of what we do. So lots of focus around providing more confidence around being LGBTQ+, perhaps in environments whereby actually there's not much LGBTQ+ recognition or visibility at all. So allied programs also form sort of a key part of what we do, along with our community building and focus on bringing folks together from across the industry. And then sort of around the bit further around the wheel here, a big focus for us is on recruitment as well. So one of our missions as an organisation is how we build and develop a new pipeline of LGBTQ+ talent for the industry, which is powered by our sort of LGBT Great Careers program, if you like. And then you can see here we do a lot of work around specific projects for clients as well, helping them with particular sort of LGBTQ issues, policy review, training programs, development of strategy as well. So really proud of the work that we do across the board. And everybody that kind of engages with us is part of our sort of Proud Work sustainability program. Really with sort of 3 missions, 1 around building the pipeline of talent for the industry, 2 around increasing visibility across the industry, and 3 around sort of improving the organizational maturity, industry maturity of LGBTQ+ inclusion. So hopefully that gives you a whistle-stop tour of what we do. I know there's some new folks and new members that have joined today. So thank you for sort of tuning in. Let's pop over on to sort of the next slide. I think, Shreyas, we're going to be talking to you here a little bit about some of the objectives for today, but also to start talking and thinking about what the data points tell us around aromantic and asexual identities before we get into our panel discussion. So do you want to take us through kind of these sort of key themes?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Matt. Like when I was like sort of thinking about how we should structure this, of course, there's going to be a very interesting panel discussion at the end. I thought that firstly, there's the thing that appeals most to people is generally data. And I was like, okay, I'm going to use some data to shine, yeah, right, to shed some light on like aromantic identities. Obviously, the basics. I'm going to talk about it in a bit, and then the array spectrum itself, so which is called the A spec for short, or array spectrum. And there's obviously a sort of an intersection, and quite a big intersection between the aromantic and asexual identities. And then, of course, the last one in terms of like, just before we jump into the panel discussion, is going to be around how you can actually be like allies and empower various individuals in the workplace. So I hope that sort of, yeah, gives you a clear understanding of what we'll go through in the next few.
Absolutely. Some really sort of, key themes there. So we're going to aim to make these across to the session today. We've actually got another Slido now. So this is going to be a big test about whether we can get it to work. But let's see what we can do. Could we open the next Slido? Is that possible, Shrey and Callum? We've got the Slido QR code at the bottom.
Yeah. I think it should work.
Okay.
You're going to have to do that one, Shrey. I'm afraid I'm not set up for it.
Okay. Give me 1 sec. I think it's an important question in my opinion.
Yeah, we've got a word cloud that's coming up, everybody, for you in a moment, which will be, when thinking about aromantic and asexual spectra of identities, what is your first thoughts? Please share one word with us. So we quite like sort of gauging sort of initial, thinking and understanding around, particular sort of issues and identities. So it should give us some good ideas. So please just bear with us a second. So what would your one word be?
All right, people are typing.
Super. And then do we need to swap over to your screen, Shrey, so we can see the results?
Can no one see the results at the moment?
We've got Callum's screen at the moment.
Oh. It should be.
But top marks for people are already typing away.
Can you see it now?
I think we've got something that's coming up. We've got the. There we go.
One of my screens is freezing. I'm sorry, folks. One of my screens keeps freezing.
No worries, no worries.
Yeah, okay. So there's a huge word there, misunderstood. Brave, unfamiliarity, hidden. Oh.
Cool is there.
Unknown, erasure.
Known. Yep.
Interesting. There's lonely coming up. I think we'll have to talk about that in like quite a lot of detail, and I would like to discuss that.
Add it onto your list, right?
Self-partner. That's also very interesting. I think this sort of word cloud actually kind of sheds light on how much we still have to sort of explore these identities in more detail and actually talk about them.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Really interesting sort of points coming through. So thanks for sharing your thoughts, everybody. And yeah, well done to the LGBT Great team as well for getting the tech to work with a few issues that we've had. So good job on that. Nothing like being put on the spot, right? But some interesting sort of words coming through here. And I know, Sarah, when we get to the conversation we're going to have with you later on in this session, some really good things to pick up on here. And I know, Callum, you'll have some perspectives on this as well. As we sort of get into it, but it's really interesting, isn't it? The main word coming through that misunderstood, misunderstood, not really knowing much about it, and I guess that's obviously consistent then with the poll we had before, this relatively low level of awareness. So thank you for sharing. Let's pop back onto the slides now, and we're going to sort of dive into sort of Shrey, you sort of sharing with us some of the themes here, definitions, and also exploring some of the data points as well into the next sort of couple of slides. But talk to us a little bit around aromantic identities and what we understand by them.
Definitely. Thank you, Matt. Again, I am not known for being laconic, so stop me if I'm palavering. And I know because we are short on time in terms of like, I actually want to hear the lived experiences, so let me know if I go on for too long. Anyway, so again, there's not a lot of text, but some text on the slide. And we talk about like what aromanticism is in its essence, and it's about not experiencing romantic attraction. And many times, like aromantic people are abbreviated to aro. And again, this is, as most things and most phenomena in this world, it is a spectrum. It's not just one identity. It falls under an umbrella. And if you're thinking about what like alloromanticism is, it's the opposite, and it's what the majority experiences in terms of experiencing romantic attraction. And again, much like other orientations, I actually picked out 3 specific orientations just to keep the conversation short and sweet.
Sure.
And these are the most important ones in terms of like the most representation. So that's why these 3 are the ones that were picked. So the first one is gray romantic, which basically means that like romantic attraction sort of changes as in flux through time. It's not like sometimes they have some romantic attraction, but not much. Sometimes it increases, sometimes it decreases. So it's sort of in a flux. Demi-romantic is an interesting one. It's sort of the counterpart of demisexual, where it means that you have to form sort of an emotional bond to actually feel any romantic attraction. And then Quero romantic, I don't know how to pronounce it, I'm sorry. It's also called WTF romantic. And I feel like this is something that sort of represents how I feel sometimes. And I've not come to terms with it in all honesty, but it's about what romance means. Like people don't really understand the idea of romance itself, what the concept means to them. They don't really relate to it. So these are like 3 of the most common orientations within the spectrum. And again, there are many others. And it is estimated that about 2 million people in the world belong to the aromantic community. And it's increasing as like Gen Z has about 3% aromantic people at one point, like one study showed, but again, it was disproved. So there was like a lot of questions. But again, as the generations keep getting more diverse, we see more aromanticism. And I suppose that is because, I conjecture, but I suppose that is because people are coming to terms with their own identities in a more profound way.
Brilliant.
Thoughts from you, Matt?
Yeah, I think that the key one here is the key takeaway from this slide, right? Is really thinking around romantic attraction or not experience romantic attraction. I think the other thing that really resonated with me as well is the concept of it being a spectrum, and people experience aromanticism, different ways and to different levels. So definitely can't sort of use a label as a one size fits all. People have, of course, very different experiences right across the board. But I think 2 million people in the world as well. I mean, it sort of shines light, doesn't it, really on the number of people that belong to the community. And I actually think that there's probably more folks out there that we actually know about and realise as well, of course. So really interesting. So thank you for sharing that. Let's pop over onto your next slide, which if I recall, is the data points. Yeah. So talk us through what are we sort of seeing here, Shrey?
Yeah, thank you, Matt. So I think the first thing, so there was this one study conducted, again, as I was speaking about the dearth of literature around aromantic identities. There was this one youth study conducted. There was about 9,758 participants, and it was by Aurelia, which basically focuses on like aromantic identities and education of aromantic identities. So the first thing I sort of picked from it was just for people to know what like sort of labels there are within the community. I thought this would be a nice graph. So you'll see like there's people who identify as aromantic / aro, aroflux, arospec, aspec, the queer romantic, lethal romantic. There's quite a lot of sort of orientations here within the spectrum. And that's what I wanted to shed light on, because the fact that like people think aromanticism is just like one orientation. It's not really like that. This was like a multiple choice question, which I found interesting. So again, those many identities, and I've also cut out on about 3 or 4 just to fit the graph into the slide, because it was under like 2%. The second thing I thought was very interesting as well was like how people were mentioning in the one word sort of thought on aromantic and asexual identities, where there was a question around, have you ever been attracted to someone romantically? And you see that there's a yes, 20%, 21%, which is a huge number. So it's not like if you're aromantic, you've never been attracted to someone. Maybe there have been times, maybe, and again, aromantic is being aromantic is such a huge spectrum in itself, as you can see on the left. So, and then there are obviously a lot of answers that were like unsure. And I feel like sometimes I'm also thinking about the fact that maybe I'm unsure of what romanticism actually means. And then, of course, there's a huge chunk of no as well. So again, that was sort of the diversity within the community that I wanted to shed a light on. And then this one, I think, is extremely important, especially given the fact that a lot of people said that like they thought aromantic identities or asexual identities as well were lonely, which I think is an absolutely wrong term to include. So you see, this graph shows mine. So the question was, my non-romantic partnership would ideally include. And then you can see a lot of things that you would, in general, sort of normative terms, associate with romance. So like emotional intimacy, adopting pets together, having children, formalizing partnerships, living together, joint bank accounts, and so on. So you see, like, non-romantic partnerships can include quite a lot of different aspects that you normally think are only associated with romantic labels. And I think that's utterly wrong. And people are not lonely. They like you can have different sort of understanding of a relationship dynamic. And I want to like just jump on the fact that like all sort of like asexuality and aromanticism has sort of given birth to queer platonic relationships and queer platonic partnerships, which is very important because obviously these are deviating from the norm, and it's a very big thing in our community, in the LGBTQ plus community as a whole. And that obviously falls under the umbrella of relationship anarchy. And as someone who sort of like believes in the concept and practices it themselves, I believe like having like aromantic and asexual sort of identities brushed under the same like umbrella and being like, okay, no, this is exactly how they function is utterly wrong. So yeah, there's so much sort of different ways to form bonds, form relationships. And I actually want to mention my colleague here, Georgie, who's hopefully on the line. And they were talking about like in the Marshall Islands, like the communities, the natives of Marshall Islands used to have like different kinship structures and how they would form communities and bonds. So again, non-monogamy, asexuality, aromanticism always deviate from the norm. And I think that's what we have to take away from this. The fact that there is, a lot of diversity within aromanticism and asexuality and relationship anarchy as well. Any thoughts from you?
Yeah, I think really good insights, Fred. I know we're going to explore some of these in a moment. If we pop over onto your sort of next slide, just very quickly, I'd like to sort of outline the difference between aromanticism and asexuality. So just want to talk to a little bit about asexuality, that we can move on to the conversation today.
Yeah, definitely. I think asexuality is a more like people more demystified sort of aspect of the community, and people sort of confuse aromanticism with asexuality, which I think is wrong.
Quite common,
Right. So basically, these are two blurbs on what exactly asexuality is. So again, complete or partial lack of sexual attraction is what we call asexuality. And then, of course, asexuality has its own sort of umbrella term, has so many sub-identities within the spectrum. And then I want to shed a light on aro ace specifically, because that's like sort of called the A spec. And I mean, I understand why people might get confused, but again, it is very important to sort of distinguish. So the first time in literature that the terminology of aromanticism actually came up was in a paper which was actually exploring asexuality, which I can link to you in the post-event comms. So it's very interesting because it's like the conception of at least the linguistic conception comes from the same fact. And then there's obviously a big overlap between both identities. So I took two specific studies here. One was like the Arrow survey respondents, and one was ACE survey. So this was specific to Arrow people and ACE people, and obviously there's an intersection. So when we saw like Arrow survey respondents, we saw that 72% of them were Arrow and ACE, while 28% of them were only Arrow, right?
Interesting.
And but in the same way, when we saw like ACE survey respondents, and this was like a meta study of like 5 total studies that were conducted, And 34% of them said they were Aro and Ace, and 66% said they were Ace only. So I think like this, by purely descriptive standards, what we can conjecture here is the fact that Aro, being Aro, you're slightly more likely to be Ace as well. Whereas if you're Ace, you're less likely, but you're still like quite likely to be Aro as well. But again, there's a lot of people who are just Aro or just Ace. And then I've sort of visualized this Aro Ace intersection in a Venn diagram if people are interested. But I think it's a good idea, understanding of how to actually think about the Aro Ace intersection. But yeah, that is me palavering. I'll go back to you, Matt.
Yeah, no, really good, Shreyna. I think good to sort of understand sort of conceptually kind of the difference, but also how these two different identities can also sort of intersect as well. If we move over on to sort of the next slide, I know we're going to be talking about some of these points sort of shortly. But actually, what I'd like to do now is to invite Sarah and Callum to join us in sort of conversation. And just over on the next slide here, it just tells you a little bit about who sort of Sarah and sort of Callum are. But perhaps we could kick off with you, Sarah, sort of first of all, and don't forget to take yourself off mute. But tell us just a bit about you, a bit of an intro to yourself, and actually what made you want to join the conversation today.
Thank you, Matt, and thank you, Shreyas. So hello, everybody. My name is Sarah. My pronouns are she, her. I am asexual, and I really just wanted to join in the conversation and raise awareness, not just about my own identity as an asexual, but also aromantic identities, just because they do kind of are co-linked with each other. And I think it would be really helpful for people who don't know much about either of these identities.
Super. Yeah, I think sharing stories and experiences, perspectives, really powerful, particularly when it comes to lived experiences, etc. as well. And sort of Callum, do you want to sort of share with everybody how you know Sarah, and also why you wanted to join this conversation today?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Callum. I'm the marketing events manager here at LGBT Great. But so Sarah and I are partners, and it's been part of why I wanted to join as well. Is I think it's a really interesting dynamic. I've had to do a lot of learning about asexuality, which I didn't know before Sarah and I started seeing each other, and as an allosexual person, so I'm bisexual, and so as someone who does experience more sexual attraction, it's been an interesting dynamic as we've navigated having a relationship across those communities.
Amazing, thank you, Callum. Thank you, Sarah. And Sarah, do you want to sort of kick us off? In terms of help, understanding more about the experience of sort of being asexual, and describe, what that means to you sort of personally.
Yeah. So I personally kind of just identify as asexual, but I've kind of in the past thought maybe I'm demisexual, gray asexual, but because neither of them felt right, I've just chosen the label of asexual. I discovered the term, goodness me, I was 18, online, on the popular blogging website Tumblr, if anybody who's watching might know that. And it was it was a good moment because, as a teenager, I had never really expressed much of an interest in sex and sexual relationships. However, I did experience romantic attraction and had crushes on people. So to finally have a term for what I was experiencing was a relief, but also quite affirming.
Yeah. So quite validating, I can imagine.
Yes.
But yeah, I guess it goes back to the point, doesn't it, of being able to see and read things that kind of resonate with your identity, and actually how much that can do to make you feel grounded, sort of in yourself. And I know one of the areas that you wanted to talk about today, and I know you've got some sort of views on, is around sort of misconceptions, really, and sort of stereotyping, which you sort of you spoke about when we were having our briefing call. Perhaps things that you've encountered, or perhaps what we tend to see when we think about sort of this space. But do you want to share a few thoughts on that for us?
Yeah, sure. So as seen in the word cloud that we had earlier, I'm sure lots of people assume that people who are Aro and Ace might not kind of feel anything. They're very like the stereotype is that we're like robots and we don't have any emotions or anything.
Or lonely, or yeah.
Yeah, which is not true at all. I mean, we're just as much of a person as someone who is allo or even someone who is queer. Like one really great example that I thought of earlier was I don't know if anyone knows Alice Oseman, the creator of Heartstopper. They are Aro Ace, and they've managed to create such a wonderful cast of characters with such heartfelt, deep messages. So the fact, the assumption that people who are Aro and Ace don't really feel anything is not true at all.
Yeah. No, it's important. Actually, linking back to you know, LGBTQ plus culture and you know, the power of media and film and things in terms of, you know, shaping those stories. I mean, Heartstopper was hugely impactful when I watched it, and I can't wait for the next series to come out, by the way. And if you haven't watched it, go and watch it. I think on Netflix, right? So really, really cool. But yeah, glad you sort of brought that up. Callum, do you want to sort of build on any sort of points that sort of Sarah mentioned there?
Yeah, I think, like Sarah said, there's a lot of kind of stereotyping around people on the ROA spectrum, talking about, you know, I mean, you hear a good amount about, you know, sexuality and romantic attraction kind of making people human, and it can be very hurtful for people on the spectrum, on the ROA spectrum, to hear things like that, because, you know, like Sarah says, they're just as much people as the rest of us. They feel very a huge diversity of feelings as well, and it's very just because you don't feel romantic attraction doesn't mean that you're not feeling very deep connections to other people, and equally, just because you're not feeling sexual attraction doesn't mean that you're not feeling similar levels of attraction and things in other respects.
Great. Let's build on a few of the points that you both referenced. I think one of them is almost like this, and maybe, you know, agree or disagree with me here, but we see a lot in obviously the bi community around bisexual erasure, right? You know, you must like one, you know, one sex over the other, or whatever the sort of the points sort of might be. And I think that's also a principle we can, you know, we see apply here as well, by the conception that, you know, that you're lonely, you know, you're on your own, all that sort of stuff. But actually, the reality is, by those stereotypes and those assumptions, actually, you know, erase, right, some of these sort of the identities and what we're talking about here. Do you want to sort of share a few thoughts on that? Do you agree, disagree?
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult one, but I think ultimately Aro Ace identities are, you know, just as important as any other identities. Whether, you know, you're more very much down the Aro spectrum or more so down the Ace spectrum.
Yeah.
I think just as long as you feel validated, people respect you, then I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
I think the respect thing really is the main driving point, because a lot of I was reading through the last December, the ACE in the UK report came out, produced by Stonewall and Yasmin Benoit, and you're reading that, it's quite heartbreaking, the descriptions of people coming forward and saying, you know, I'm asexual or aromantic, and then not being believed by colleagues or friends or medical professionals, and being treated like there's something wrong with them, and or something incorrect. And, you know, it's a respect piece when someone, I want people to be able to live their true identity and be very open about their identity as much as they want to be, without kind of allosexual people or alloromantic people kind of imposing this sort of normative, heteronormative idea on people.
Yeah, and it's kind of that makes the concept, isn't it? How, you know, how can you fit into a, you know, a societal structure and world and understanding of relationships and attraction, you know, when you are different. And I think, you know, by validating identities and being able to see role models and others, and you know, representation, of course, in film, as Sarah mentioned before, it can go a long way, right, to making folks feel more grounded. I guess that also plays out right in an organizational context, the context of what we do. It's around, how can we create more visibility and validation for folks that do sometimes feel like they don't fit in or that they are different to others. So I think really interesting points there. Let's quickly sort of build on one of the things you said. I know you spent a bit of time, kind of also Shrey as well, looking for the data points behind here. But talk us a bit about sort of what we tend to see data points when it comes to sort of mental and sort of well-being within the community. Callum, do you want to share a few thoughts? Shrey, we can come over to you.
Yeah, so again, we know that those on the LGBT community are more likely to feel to experience poor mental health. And again, looking through the ACE report there, it's something like 40% of asexual people reported feeling sort of depression or anxiety. And I think that's, it's heartbreaking. And again, you read through the reports on these and people just not being taken seriously by the medical establishment or being taken seriously, accessing mental health resources because they're sort of their identities being medicalized in a way and being told that, oh, because your depression, anxiety, etc., which can stem from being invalidated, is actually because of your race or Aro identity, rather than because of the way they're being treated by the rest of the society.
Yeah, really, really good points. So, Sarah, do you want to draw on some of those points? How does that resonate with you?
Yeah. So I haven't experienced a great deal of, say, discrimination personally, just because I'm quite particular about who I disclose my identity to, due to, I guess, assumptions and discrimination and things like that. Those who I have told, close friends mainly, and they're very accepting of it, which I'm very grateful for. And
it's good to hear.
Yeah. I guess it's difficult to talk about in a very kind of, our society is very kind of love and kind of sex obsessed, for lack of a better word.
Sure.
So when you feel like you don't really fit that mold, or you're kind of confused by it, it's like, oh, what do I have to do to do this? But then it doesn't feel right, of course, and then it just spirals into this of course, depression or maybe anxiety. It can be quite tough for some people.
Yeah, and I think that kind of the principle that we see play out in lots of different sort of underrepresented communities was that point around that not fitting in and not feeling like you belong, right? Is kind of the stuff that can make you feel over time, really sort of quiet down. And sometimes you have to hear to it, right? Death by 1,000 cuts type of thinking. Shrey, let's pop over to you. We're in the last sort of 5 minutes of our conversation now. Let's hear some thoughts from you on what sort of Sarah and Callum have said, and then let's think about organizationally. What could make a difference to folks?
No, definitely. I think one thing that I just wanted to reflect on, I mean, absolutely right. Like the ACE report showed us that there's mental health sort of an epidemic for people in the LGBTQ plus community, but specifically for the ACE community. And there's been multiple sort of studies specifically for asexual identities, which have shown us that, again, mental health has not been very generous to them, in all honesty. And it's obviously because of the environment that we live in. And one thing that I wanted to talk about specifically was when Sarah mentioned this idea of coming out to specific people only because you feel safe. So I think one thing, obviously, organizations as colleagues, I personally want everyone to feel safe around me, psychologically safe. So of course you have to build sort of that trust and also be open-minded. So when you're a colleague to someone, especially in an organization, I know for a fact, I think I've told this story before, but when I was in India and when I was interning at Ogilvy, there was this one person who had a pride flag, and obviously we used to interact and we used to talk, but I used to feel safe around them. So I think again, it brings, you get that sort of safety to come out in those ways. And of course, for me, I'm non-monogamous, so I don't practice monogamy. So it's very like even for me, in some ways and form, I only sort of tell very specific people I know who won't judge me. So there's always like sort of this judgment, right, behind everything that you tell them, which is not the norm. So yeah, definitely in organization, especially, you have to feel safe. And again, I believe any act of allyship has to come from like calling in or out. Like when you see some sort of negative comments being passed about, like, for example, the asexual community or the aromantic community, you have to call them out or in, obviously depending on the circumstance. And yeah, these are like two of the things that are very important. And of course, educating yourself.
Yeah.
Even
Yeah,
just,
I think really good points.
Sorry, yeah, go on, Matt. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I think really good points. And one of the things you said there was around, seeing these sort of signs and signals which make you feel safe, right? So of course, pride flags and sort of pride symbols, lanyards in your organization, really good thing to do. We time and time again, I will go to a meeting and there is that sense of, I don't know what it is and how to explain it, but it's this kind of like, oh, I'm all right here. This is a really cool place to be. I just feel instantly more at ease. And I'm pretty sort of confident now in my own identity, but I've got to say I still experience that feeling of safety by seeing visible symbols, which I think is really important. We've got three or 4 minutes, and for everyone that's online, the folks on the line as well, I like finishing on time. So I want to get into a bit of a quick fire now around ideas, and there's a couple of questions that have come through around, how do we bring this into our organizations, and what would make a difference to you? So let's perhaps have a bit of a quick fire thinking on here. But Sarah, if we perhaps come to you first, things in the workplace that have made you feel better, what works for you?
So I think I like the idea of having like little pride flags around, or that would make me feel a lot more safe as well. But I think as well, particularly with Aro and Ace identities, people obviously would know even less about these. So I think it could be helpful to maybe have like a workshop where a speaker comes in and people can ask them questions. So at least then there's a discussion, and then people learn more as well, which could be quite helpful.
Yeah. So I think, look, takeaway there is perhaps build in some specific programming into your LGBTQ+ calendar that is specific around Aro and Ace. Is what I took from that. Have I got that right?
Yeah, more or less.
Yeah. Amazing. Thank you. Let's pop over to Callum. What are your thoughts, Callum? What would make a difference within an organization for you?
Yeah, I think that's really key, the education piece, because as one of the sort of lesser talked about sexualities within the LGBT community, I think it's important to highlight them and provide a space. I think one of the Q&A questions that's come in talks about how to make people feel comfortable coming out in what they see as a workplace appropriate environment. And certainly, there's as a bisexual person, there's a kind of like, oh, how do you bring up that? And I think providing a kind of workshop or a speaker to come in to provide that space of like, let's talk about aromanticism or asexuality, I think it provides that space. So yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah, so building on what sort of Sarah shared there, but role modeling around this space, really kind of key. And I guess obviously everything that we do at LGBT Great is all linked back to visibility, role modeling of things, and also folks as well. Shrey, what about for you? What's the one thing that can help organizations do within this space?
Yeah, I think organizations have to be proactive instead of reactive, because again, as generations diversify, you have to understand that the workforces that are going to hit, for example, Gen Alpha is predicted to be even more diverse than Gen Z. So I think, again, asexuality and aromanticism are also like, people now have a linguistic conception of how they feel. And I think that's very important. So again,
amazing.
Be proactive instead of being reactive. And I think it's extremely important just to follow a D&I strategy that actually spotlights and empowers asexual and aromantic people.
Yeah. And we have got some after sort of copy for you as well, and some guidance on organizational things that you can do around creating that culture of inclusion for Aro and Ace people. And we'll share that out as a post event, post webinar comms for you. And just before we let you go today, we just want to get your thinking actually on one final poll question. I'm just wondering whether we can make it work quick enough, Shrey, to see if we can just get people's last thoughts. Here we go. We're getting good at this now. So one final poll question. It's going to look at sort of appetite really around lived experiences of aromantic people through new data. Would that be helpful to you? Let's see what people are saying. Well, most people are saying yes, which is good, telling us something, isn't it?
I think one thing I came across quite a lot was just no data, and I'm not used to that. So I was always thinking like, okay, this is like an area of research we really have to like explore,
focus on. Yeah,
because people, again, as we see through this webinar and through Slido, like people really are like starting to get to know these identities. So I think again, all these yeses are a good sign, and definitely we need more data. 33 people saying yes, that's important.
Yeah, well, I think that's kind of compelling, isn't it? So I think more data points around this to help organizations understand lived experiences, workplace experiences. I think it's really powerful things that Sarah, you've shared that I think could help make a difference in organizations and make sure we're leveling up approaches for support around these people as well, this community. So thank you very much for sharing those. We're 2 minutes over, but I think we've got some really good outcomes from this session. Hopefully everyone dialing in, you found that useful. And I just want to say, thank you for bearing with us as well with a couple of the tech issues. Well done to the LGBT team for navigating those. And I want to get you thinking ahead into next week. We've got a really fantastic History Month webinar next week with a couple of amazing speakers from our core member city. And we're going to be exploring Black LGBTQ plus experiences and role models and what organizations can do. And we're also going to be sharing with you sort of a new sort of focus for us post the webinar. Around building more visibility and confidence around the intersections of race, ethnicity, and LGBTQ as well. So do tune in for that. For those of you who are talking to us about becoming a member at the moment, we are in the middle of onboarding new organisations onto our sort of membership platform. And there's some really interesting ways in which you can sort of collaborate with us. So if you are interested in becoming a member, you can reach out to us as well, and then we'll pop a link in for you in the email that comes out as well. But thank you very much, and let's close out there. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.